My family declared me missing. I returned to claim everything they sold. I never thought my life would turn into what people now call a family declared me missing revenge story, but everything changed the day I disappeared. My name is Ethan Cole, and before everything fell apart, I had built a life that most people would envy. I worked hard, stayed focused, and slowly turned my small investments into something powerful. My properties were growing, my business was stable, and my future was secure. But what I didn't know was that the people closest to me were watching, waiting, and calculating their next move. It started on an ordinary morning. I remember leaving my house with no sign that it would be the last time anyone would see me for weeks. My phone died halfway through the day, my car broke down in a remote area, and I ended up completely cut off from everyone I knew. There was no signal, no quick way back, and no way to contact anyone. What should have been a small inconvenience turned into days of isolation. I struggled, survived, and tried to find my way back, but during that time, something far worse was happening behind my back. Back home, my family didn't search for me the way you would expect. They didn't organize rescue efforts, they didn't call endlessly, and they didn't wait with hope. Instead, they moved fast. Too fast. Within days, they began telling people I was missing. Within weeks, they started acting like I was gone forever. That was the first betrayal, but it wasn't the worst. My mother, Margaret Cole, stood at the center of it all, pretending to be heartbroken while quietly signing papers. My uncle, Richard Cole, took control of my business affairs, claiming it was necessary to protect the family. My younger brother, Daniel, didn't question anything. He followed along, enjoying the sudden access to money and power. And my cousin Sophia? She made sure everything moved quickly, pushing legal processes forward as if my absence was an opportunity they couldn't afford to waste. They didn't just believe I was gone. They decided I was gone. And that decision changed everything. As the days passed, they took steps that no real family should ever take. They filed reports, signed documents, and started preparing to take ownership of everything I had built. My house, my shares, my accounts, everything slowly slipped out of my name and into theirs. The story they told the world was simple: Ethan Cole is missing, and we are just trying to manage what he left behind. But the truth was far darker. They weren't managing anything. They were claiming it. They were dividing it. They were erasing me. And while they were doing all this, I was still alive. Still breathing. Still fighting to get back. I remember the exact moment I realized something was wrong. I finally reached a place with signal and managed to turn my phone back on. Messages flooded in, but none of them were what I expected. There were no desperate calls asking where I was. No emotional messages from family begging me to come home. Instead, I saw formal notifications, missed calls from unknown numbers, and emails that made my chest tighten. One message stood out. It was a legal notice. My name was there, but not in the way it should have been. It referred to me as a missing person. I read it once, then twice, then a third time, hoping I had misunderstood. But I hadn't. My own family had officially declared me missing. I stood there in silence, trying to process what it meant. Missing? How could they do that so quickly? Why would they move on without even making sure? That was the moment everything shifted inside me. Confusion turned into suspicion. Suspicion turned into anger. And anger slowly turned into something colder, something sharper. I started digging deeper, checking more messages, opening more emails, and what I found confirmed my worst fears. Properties were being discussed. Shares were being transferred. Decisions were being made without me. It wasn't panic. It wasn't grief. It was strategy. They had seen an opportunity, and they took it. They didn't wait for proof of my death. They created their own version of it. And in that moment, I understood something clearly. This was no longer just about survival. This was about betrayal. Real betrayal. The kind that doesn't come from strangers, but from the people who sit at your table, who smile in your face, who call you family. I didn't rush back immediately. I didn't call them to announce I was alive. Instead, I stayed quiet. I watched. I listened. I planned. Because if my family could move this fast to erase me, then I needed to be even smarter to take everything back. They thought I was gone. They thought they had won. But they had no idea what was coming. And trust me, this family declared me missing revenge story was only just beginning. If you're already feeling this story, make sure you subscribe, like, and stay with me, because what happened next will shock you even more. The moment I understood that my life had turned into a family declared me missing revenge story, I stopped thinking like a victim and started thinking like someone who had been betrayed at the deepest level. My name is Ethan Cole, and while I was still alive, breathing, and trying to find my way back, my family had already moved on as if I no longer existed. But what hurt the most was not just what they did, it was how easily they did it. They didn't hesitate, they didn't struggle, and they didn't even pretend for long. They acted like they had been waiting for this moment. Back home, my disappearance quickly became a tool. My mother, Margaret Cole, played her role perfectly in public. She spoke softly, wore sadness on her face, and told everyone how painful it was to lose her son. But behind closed doors, she was the one signing documents, approving decisions, and making sure everything stayed under her control. My uncle, Richard Cole, didn't waste any time either. He stepped into my business like he had always belonged there. He spoke to partners, reviewed contracts, and slowly positioned himself as the new authority. People trusted him because he carried the Cole name, but they didn't know the truth. He wasn't protecting anything. He was taking over. Daniel, my younger brother, changed the fastest. Before I disappeared, he was always in my shadow, always trying to prove himself. But now, with me out of the picture, he stepped forward with confidence I had never seen before. He started making decisions, spending money, and enjoying the benefits of a life he didn't build. And Sophia, my cousin, made sure everything moved smoothly. She handled the legal side, pushing the process forward faster than it should have gone. She knew exactly what to say, who to contact, and how to make everything look legitimate. Together, they created a system that worked in their favor. A system built on my absence. They filed official reports, declared me missing, and began the legal process to take control of my estate. It didn't take long for things to escalate. What started as temporary management quickly turned into permanent decisions. My house was no longer being maintained, it was being evaluated for sale. My business shares were no longer on hold, they were being reassigned. Every step they took pushed me further out of my own life. And the worst part was, they made it look normal. They made it look justified. They told everyone they were doing what was necessary. That they were protecting the family's future. That they had no choice. But I knew the truth. They had a choice. And they chose greed. As I watched everything unfold from a distance, I realized something important. This was not panic. This was not confusion. This was planned behavior. Maybe not planned in detail, but planned in intention. They were ready to take advantage of any opportunity, and my disappearance gave them exactly what they needed. I kept reading messages, checking updates, and gathering information. Every new detail felt like another betrayal. I saw emails discussing how to divide profits. I saw documents outlining ownership changes. I even saw conversations about selling properties I had worked years to acquire. They weren't waiting for me to come back. They were preparing for a future without me. That was when the anger inside me settled into something more controlled. I stopped reacting emotionally and started observing strategically. If this was going to be a family declared me missing revenge story, then I needed to understand every move they made. I needed to see the full picture before I stepped back into it. Days turned into weeks, and their confidence grew stronger. The longer I stayed silent, the more comfortable they became. They stopped looking over their shoulders. They stopped questioning anything. In their minds, I was gone for good. And that belief made them careless. They began making bigger moves. Riskier moves. Moves that would eventually expose them. My uncle started negotiating major deals using my business name. My mother approved the sale of one of my most valuable properties. Daniel began living a lifestyle that didn't match his past at all. And Sophia continued pushing legal processes forward, making sure everything stayed in their favor. They were building their new reality on top of my disappearance. But what they didn't know was that I was watching every step, learning every detail, preparing for the moment when everything would change. I didn't rush back because I knew something they didn't. The stronger they believed in their version of the story, the harder their fall would be. The more they took, the more I would have to reclaim. And when that moment came, it wouldn't just be about proving I was alive. It would be about proving everything they did was wrong. I wasn't just coming back as Ethan Cole. I was coming back with evidence, with strategy, and with a clear purpose. They declared me missing. They erased my name. They took control of my life. But they forgot one thing. I was still here. And I was not done. This family declared me missing revenge story was no longer about what they did to me. It was about what I was going to do next. By the time my story had fully turned into a family declared me missing revenge story, my family had stopped pretending and started living the life they stole from me. My name is Ethan Cole, and while I stayed silent, watching from a distance, they crossed a line that could never be undone. They didn't just take control of my assets anymore. They began selling my life piece by piece. It started with my house. The place I built from the ground up, the place that carried my effort, my time, and my vision, was suddenly listed on the market. I saw the listing online, clean pictures, polished descriptions, and not a single mention of me. It was as if I had never lived there. As if I had never existed. My mother, Margaret Cole, approved the decision without hesitation. She called it a necessary step, something that had to be done for the family's stability. But I knew better. There was nothing necessary about it. It was greed, simple and clear. My uncle, Richard Cole, handled the negotiations. He spoke confidently, like a man who owned everything he was selling. He made deals, shook hands, and collected money that didn't belong to him. People trusted him because he sounded professional, but they didn't know he was selling a life that wasn't his to sell. Daniel didn't even try to hide his excitement anymore. He moved into a new apartment, drove a better car, and started living a lifestyle he had never earned. Every picture he posted, every update he shared, showed just how quickly he had adjusted to his new reality. And Sophia made sure everything stayed legally clean on paper. She pushed documents through, finalized transactions, and made sure no one questioned the process. Together, they created a system that turned my absence into profit. And they did it without guilt. I watched everything carefully. Every sale, every transfer, every decision. I didn't miss a single detail. Because I knew that every move they made would matter later. Every document they signed would become evidence. Every deal they closed would become something I could challenge. They thought they were securing their future, but they were actually building my case. The biggest move came when they decided to sell part of my business shares. That was when I truly understood how far they were willing to go. My business was not just an investment. It was the result of years of work, sleepless nights, and calculated risks. And now, they were handing pieces of it away like it meant nothing. I read the emails between Richard and potential buyers. I saw how he presented the opportunity, how he explained my absence, how he made it sound like everything was under control. He didn't sound like a man stepping in temporarily. He sounded like the owner. That was the moment something inside me hardened completely. There was no more doubt, no more hesitation. This was betrayal at the highest level. But while they were busy selling, celebrating, and spending, I was doing something they never expected. I was preparing. I started organizing everything I had collected. Messages, emails, documents, timelines. I built a clear picture of everything they had done from the moment I disappeared. I traced every action back to its source. I connected every decision to the people behind it. And slowly, I built something stronger than anger. I built control. Because this family declared me missing revenge story was not going to end with emotions. It was going to end with precision. I made sure I understood the legal side. I studied the process they used to declare me missing. I looked into the timelines, the requirements, and the shortcuts they took. And I found what I was looking for. They had moved too fast. They had pushed things forward without proper confirmation. They had created gaps in their own system. Gaps I could use. The more I learned, the clearer my path became. I wasn't just coming back to confront them. I was coming back to take everything they touched and turn it against them. They believed they were safe because I was silent. They believed their version of the story was complete. But silence does not mean absence. And absence does not mean defeat. It means preparation. Weeks passed, and their confidence reached its peak. They stopped being careful. They stopped questioning anything. They acted like everything was already theirs. And that was exactly what I needed. Because when people feel secure, they expose themselves. They reveal their true intentions. And my family had revealed everything. I remember standing there one evening, looking at the final set of documents I had gathered. Every sale, every transfer, every signature was right in front of me. It was no longer just a story. It was proof. Solid, undeniable proof. And in that moment, I made my decision. I was done watching. Done waiting. Done staying in the shadows. They thought I was gone. They thought they had taken everything. But they forgot one simple truth. Nothing they took was ever truly theirs. And now, I was ready to remind them. This family declared me missing revenge story was about to change direction. Because the next time they saw my name, it wouldn't be on a missing person report. It would be on everything they tried to take from me. The day I stepped back into my life was the day this family declared me missing revenge story turned from silence into shock. My name is Ethan Cole, and after weeks of watching, learning, and preparing, I was finally ready to face the people who had erased me. But I didn't rush in with anger or noise. I walked in with control. Calm, steady, and fully aware of what I was about to do. I chose my moment carefully. My uncle, Richard Cole, had scheduled a meeting with investors and legal representatives to finalize another major deal involving my business shares. It was the perfect setting. Everyone who needed to see the truth would be in that room. Everyone who believed their version of the story would be forced to face mine. I arrived without warning. The building looked the same, the entrance felt familiar, but everything inside had changed. Or maybe it was me who had changed. I walked through the doors, past the reception, and straight toward the boardroom where they were all gathered. No one stopped me. No one questioned me. Because no one expected me. As I reached the door, I paused for a brief moment. Not out of fear, but out of certainty. This was it. The moment everything would shift. Then I opened the door and stepped inside. Silence fell instantly. Conversation stopped. Faces turned. And for a few seconds, no one moved. My uncle stood frozen, his confidence gone in a single moment. My mother, Margaret Cole, looked at me like she had seen something impossible. Daniel's expression changed from comfort to confusion, then to fear. And Sophia, who always had an answer for everything, had nothing to say. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rush my words. I simply walked forward, placed my hand on the table, and looked directly at them. "You look surprised," I said calmly. No one responded. The room was still, heavy with tension. The investors and legal representatives looked between us, unsure of what was happening. They had been told I was missing. Gone. And yet, here I was. Standing right in front of them. Alive. Present. And fully aware. My uncle was the first to speak, but his voice lacked the confidence he once had. He tried to recover, tried to explain, tried to control the situation. But it was too late. The moment I walked into that room, control shifted. "Ethan, we thought," he started, but I didn't let him finish. "You thought I was gone," I said, cutting through his words. "No, you decided I was gone." That one sentence changed everything. The room felt smaller, tighter, like the truth had taken up all the space. I turned my attention to the others. "You declared me missing," I continued, my voice steady. "You took control of my assets, my business, my life. And then you started selling it like it belonged to you." No one interrupted. No one denied it. Because they knew I had more than just words. I had proof. I reached into my folder and placed documents on the table. Emails, signed agreements, transaction records. Everything I had spent weeks gathering. Each piece of paper was a step they had taken without me. Each one was a decision they thought I would never see. The legal representatives began reviewing the documents immediately. Their expressions changed quickly. Confusion turned into concern. Concern turned into seriousness. Because what they were seeing was not just a misunderstanding. It was a pattern. A clear, calculated pattern. My mother finally spoke, her voice softer than I had ever heard it. "Ethan, we were trying to protect everything," she said. But her words didn't carry weight anymore. "Protect it?" I repeated. "By selling it?" There was no answer to that. Daniel avoided my eyes completely. Sophia tried to regain her composure, but even she couldn't hold her usual confidence. Because the truth was simple. They had built everything on the idea that I would never come back. And now that I had, everything they built was starting to fall apart. I straightened up and looked around the room, making sure every person there understood what was happening. "I'm not here to argue," I said clearly. "I'm here to take back what is mine." Those words settled into the room like a final decision. Because that's exactly what they were. This was not a discussion. This was a correction. The legal team began asking questions, not to me, but to them. Timelines, approvals, justifications. And with every question, their position became weaker. Their confidence disappeared completely. Because they had no solid ground to stand on anymore. Everything they did was based on my absence. And now, that absence no longer existed. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to threaten anyone. My presence alone was enough. Because I was the one thing they never planned for. I was the proof that their entire strategy was built on a lie. As the meeting shifted away from them and toward the reality of the situation, I knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning of the end for them. They had taken everything thinking I would never return. But now, I was here. And I wasn't leaving without reclaiming every single thing they touched. This family declared me missing revenge story had reached its turning point. And from this moment forward, the power was no longer in their hands. It was in mine. The final chapter of this family declared me missing revenge story was never going to be about noise or drama, it was always going to be about results. My name is Ethan Cole, and by the time I walked out of that boardroom, everything had already begun to shift back into place. Not because I demanded it, but because the truth left no other option. The documents I presented were only the beginning. Once the legal team started digging deeper, everything my family had done began to unravel faster than they could contain it. Every sale they made, every signature they placed, every decision they rushed without proper authority became a problem they could not explain. My uncle, Richard Cole, who once stood tall and confident, was now struggling to answer simple questions. The same man who negotiated deals in my name now had to explain why he acted without confirmation of my status. And there was no strong answer for that. My mother, Margaret Cole, could no longer hide behind her emotional act. The image of a grieving parent disappeared the moment facts replaced feelings. She had approved transactions, signed off on decisions, and supported actions that clearly benefited her more than anyone else. Daniel, my younger brother, who had enjoyed the rewards of a life he didn't build, now found himself in a position he couldn't escape. The lifestyle he had quickly adapted to was now under scrutiny, and every benefit he received was being traced back to decisions that were no longer valid. And Sophia, who had carefully handled the legal side, now faced the consequences of pushing processes too quickly. The shortcuts she took, the speed she encouraged, and the confidence she had in the system were now working against her. Because in the end, the system only works when the truth supports it. And in this case, it didn't. Within days, everything began to reverse. The sale of my house was flagged and placed under review. The transfer of my business shares was challenged and suspended. Financial accounts were frozen until ownership could be properly restored. It wasn't instant, and it wasn't easy, but it was happening. Step by step, piece by piece, everything they took was coming back to me. But what mattered more than the assets was the shift in power. The same people who once acted like they owned everything were now being questioned, investigated, and held accountable. The confidence they had built on my absence disappeared completely. And in its place came something they had not expected to face. Consequences. I didn't celebrate loudly. I didn't insult them or seek revenge in the way most people imagine. Because this family declared me missing revenge story was never about shouting or proving a point with anger. It was about restoring what was mine and letting the truth do the rest. And the truth was doing more than enough. There was a moment, not long after everything began to settle, when I stood alone in what used to be my house. The same house they tried to sell. The same house they thought I would never return to. It was quiet, almost empty, but it felt right. Because it was mine again. Not just legally, but completely. Earned, built, and reclaimed. I thought about everything that had happened, how quickly people can change when opportunity appears, how easily trust can be broken, and how important it is to stay calm when everything feels out of control. Because if I had reacted too quickly, if I had returned without understanding what they were doing, I might have lost everything. But instead, I waited. I learned. I prepared. And when the time was right, I acted. That was the difference. That was what turned this from a loss into a victory. My family avoided me after everything came out. Conversations stopped, excuses faded, and distance replaced familiarity. Not because I forced it, but because they had nothing left to say. They had made their choices, and those choices defined everything that followed. As for me, I moved forward. Stronger, wiser, more aware than ever before. Because this experience didn't just show me who they were. It showed me who I needed to be. Someone who doesn't break under pressure. Someone who doesn't react without thinking. Someone who knows when to stay silent and when to step forward. This family declared me missing revenge story didn't end with me getting revenge in the way people expect. It ended with me taking back control, restoring my life, and proving that truth, when used correctly, is more powerful than any plan built on lies. And if there is one thing I want you to take from this, it is this. Never underestimate the power of patience, and never assume silence means weakness. Because sometimes, silence is where the strongest plans are made. If this story kept you hooked and you want more powerful stories like this, make sure you subscribe, like, comment, and share, because the next story might be even more shocking than this one.